on the dial. And we have our very first guest with us of the day. Lee Lincoln is author of The Road West, a Broken Roads book. And she has spent the better part of the last 30 years involved in homeless and poverty advocacy in one way or another. She is the author of 4 inspirational novels. She loves to inspire others to find their voice, explore the world, never be left out of the conversation. And her passion lies in crafting inspiring novels that impact readers at a very deep emotional level. She hopes to inspire, uplift, and provoke thoughtful conversations while fulfilling her desire to give back to those in need, as a portion of the proceeds from her novels goes directly to charities that serve the homeless. And since this is such a huge issue right now in California, since California has, I believe, the largest population of homeless in the nation, this is really a timely topic. Lee Lincoln, good morning and welcome to the morning show. How are you doing? Oh, I don't quite have you. Are you?
Good morning.
Good
Yes.
morning, Lee. Good to see you. It's nice to talk with you in person, per se, over the Zoom.
Yes. The wonderful world of Zoom that we're all kind of part of now.
Yes, we are.
So,
Most definitely. So let's give our readers a little bit of a background first. Why did you feel compelled to write a whole series of the Broken Road books? Circling all around, the homeless issues, poverty issues. It is a big issue in the U.S. Tell us about your journey to start writing these books.
well, my first book I completely wrote accidentally. I wasn't intending to write a book. I'd just been doing the work for years. But because I was just a woman, just a mom, just a volunteer, no one was kind of listening to me. And so one night I just started journaling and it accidentally turned into a novel. And so I published it. And the funny thing happened, when you publish a book, you become an expert, even if it is a novel. And so my first book, Road Home, is all about homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And so my other books are on other topics, but they also are all very timely topics. The second one talks about immigration. The third book talks about divorce, and also touches a little bit on homelessness because, again, it just kind of creeps into my work. And the fourth book deals with infidelity and guilt, which a lot of women deal with. And again, that also is a very timely topic. So
Yeah.
I'm just into, hey, I've been there, done that, heard a lot of stories, and now I'm just having fun writing. So, yeah.
Well, that's good. That is good. So why don't you tell us a little bit? The new book is The Road West. Tell us a little bit about it, its background, and the plot, and our main characters.
Right. The Road West, the main character is Diamond, and she's an elderly woman. And in her youth, she had this moment of indiscretion where she almost had an affair, but then she stopped herself. And over the course of many years, the guilt from that just kind of ruined a lot of things. And what she didn't realize is the other half of that equation, the man in that equation, also was kind of devastated from that one moment. And so now a stranger has brought her letters from him, Luis, and now she gets to see the other half of it, like the butterfly effect. Yeah. And you just don't know where those little tiny moments just totally change your life and other people's lives. And so it's kind of interesting. And so I had lots of fun writing it. And again, it's also really, really timely because a lot of women feel a lot of guilt over little things they probably shouldn't, but they do. And then it just changes the whole course of their lives.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the
Yes.
truth? Every day we make a zillion tiny little decisions. And of course, some of them are much larger decisions, whether or not to go into or leave a relationship, whether or not to have a relationship on the side of a marriage, all kinds of choices that get made. And we don't necessarily always have the opportunity to imagine what what those decisions have in terms of rolling effects on others, that it goes out like a ripple, from a
Right.
pebble in the water. And it often isn't until much later that you find out what all that's going to be, and how that can affect that. Now, you have talked in the past, a real passionate topic of yours is travel, all things travel related. Tell us a little bit about, why you chose, Broken Road, Road Home, Road to Freedom, road stories.
Well, because every life is a journey. And all of my characters are on a physical, spiritual, and emotional journey. And as I try to explain to a lot of people, if your life is perfect, I want to know you because you're the one person on the planet who is. So, yeah.
Touche.
Exactly. So all of my characters are facing a different problem that they're trying to fix and face and deal with and find a new path, because life is twisty, weird, wild, and that's what I try to show in my stories is that journey, and how sometimes it takes the intervention of someone else to get us to really see where we went wrong and how to move forward. And so each story has a character who is a side character who gets to hear the whole story for whatever reason. And I really love that about my stories. And it's kind of unique and kind of different because most stories aren't written that way. So, but in life, that's what a lot of times happens.
Yeah.
And when I was working with the homeless, a lot of times what made them decide to change and get off the streets was having me sit down and listen to them and hear their stories. And that's part of the reason why I ended up writing my stories the way I did, because of that experience. Because a lot of times, no one will actually sit down and have a conversation. And especially right now, like, who has a conversation anymore? Nobody does. And I'm one of the few people, I will talk to anybody. And it frustrates some people because they're like, wait, why would you want to have a conversation with me? I'm just one of those people. I'll talk to anybody. And, you can be homeless. You can be at an event. I'll stop my entire day and you are my focus. And yeah, tell me everything. I want to hear it all. The good, the bad, the ugly. I don't care. And so that's why I set up my books like that.
Very cool. Very cool. So while we're on the topic of homelessness, poverty, the inaction, there's certainly the downward spiral to it, but then there's also an endless loop, it seems, in it. And as you know, San Francisco, at the very least, has an enormous problem, but California as a whole has huge homelessness problems, poverty, and of course there are drug-related problems that have been instrumental in increasing the homeless problem, but it's not the only reason for it. What do you want our listeners to know about your experience working with the homeless and your advocacy? What would you like to tell them?
Well, the first thing is there's a few myths around homelessness in California in particular. A lot of people think that California attracts the homelessness because of the weather, which is not true. 9 out of 10 people experiencing homelessness in California are from California. So let's bust that myth right now. Second, you mentioned mental illness and addiction. A lot of people think that that's a driving factor to homelessness, when in fact it's not. A lot of those people end up with those issues after they're out on the streets, not before. So yes, I understand that a lot of people experiencing homelessness have addiction and mental health issues. But again, it's not a driving factor that pushes them onto the streets. So yeah, it's there, but it's not what pushes them out.
Mm-hmm.
So we often talk about what's called the slow slide into homelessness. So you get into a situation where people are either in a home that they own or in a rental, and the cost goes up for whatever reason. Rent increases, or if they're in a home, the homeowner's insurance increases, utilities go up. And right now with inflation, the cost of living in itself goes up. Food prices are up. The cost of gas in California especially has risen tremendously. So the little tiny little things go up. And because so many people don't have a cushion and they don't have any savings to fall back on, then they are this close to being homeless to begin with, and now all of these things have increased. So then what happens is they don't have anything to fall back on, and then they slowly get behind on rent payments or mortgage payments, and they can hold on for so long, but then one extra little thing happens. For example, they don't get the raise they were expecting, or one person in the household who had a job lost the job, or heaven forbid, somebody has a medical crisis, and now all of a sudden there's this huge amount of debt that they weren't expecting, and nope, everything's out the window. There is no way they can catch up. So it's, like I say, it's what we call the slow slide into homelessness, or the lobster in the pot theory, right? You know, you put the lobster in the pot and they don't know how bad it is until it's too late. And then they don't know who to reach out to for help, or they're afraid to get help because they're afraid that everyone will stigmatize them for getting help. And so then the next thing they know, there's an eviction notice on their door, or there's a foreclosure notice, right? Yeah. And then they just deer in the headlights, and then their whole world just stops. And then the next thing they know, they're living in their car. and you hear this a lot from people who are, you know, out on the streets, and they just have no plan and nowhere to go. And you see this a lot, especially in really expensive states like California, unfortunately.
Yeah. And from living in the car at a certain point, the loop keeps going, and the spiral keeps coming down.
Right, because at some point then even the car can't be afforded because the car has expenses and the car breaks down, and yes, it just, because then you have a hard time being clean enough to go to your job, and yes, it just keeps spiraling. And then they're in crisis mode, and this is when addiction starts coming into play. Like I said, addiction a lot of times is not the precipitating factor, it's a follow-up factor, because yeah, I can't deal with this. And so you see why I said that before, right? Yeah. So then addiction comes into play. A lot of times the kids end up in foster care if there are children involved. So yeah, the spiral just gets worse. And I've seen this a lot. It doesn't matter what state you're in. Yeah. The spiral is the same no matter where you are.
Is there a way out?
What?
Is there a way out?
There is a way out, but a lot of times it takes people understanding how they get in this situation in the first place and stop it from happening before it even starts. But a lot of people don't want to see that they need to rethink how they even buy groceries. You need to understand the difference between a need and a want. You need to understand you have to have that cushion, and you have to understand what the basics are. But in our consumer driven society, we don't want to talk about this until we have to. But we really need to talk about this before we have to, not after. And so there's this term now called house poor, which a lot of people don't understand. They don't want to discuss. They're like, yeah, what? But right now, like something like a third of Americans who own a home are house poor. That means a third of their income is going to keep them into their house, which makes it where they can't save at all. And this, again, has a lot to do with inflation because the price of everything has just gone up.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to encourage people is really before they purchase a home to think about what it's going to cost to keep them in their home. Just because a bank says you can purchase a home at this level doesn't mean you should. You really need to go way under what a bank says you should and look at other options. Be creative in your thinking. You know, and I know California has very, very high housing market prices. I understand this. I do. I've never lived in California. Probably wouldn't want to. But there are some creative solutions even in California. There are distressed homes on the market. I know a lot of them are snapped up fairly quickly by people who want to flip them. But they are available. There's also some creative tiny home solutions. I saw somebody who purchased a fuselage from an airplane and turned it into a home. I mean, let's just talk about really creative, low cost solutions, train cars, shipping crates. You know, unfortunately, also in California, some of the zoning laws prohibit creative solutions. So this is also where you need to be advocates for yourselves and your community and go to your city council and say, hey, everything is ridiculous. Let's have a conversation about why are the zoning laws making it harder to have affordable homes in my community? And because California, I was looking at some of the zoning laws before for prepping for this show. And I saw that there were so many zoning laws where they said, you can't have a tiny home unless it's in a trailer park or a mother-in-law suite.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And in other states, that is not the case. So you're actually making it difficult for people to live responsibly, reasonably. And so this takes quite a few people to just start going to your city council and saying, hey, no, we need to work on this. We need to find a reasonable solution that works for everyone, not just for those who have the giant mansions. Yeah. Because
Absolutely.
again, we can't. We have to have a solution that works for everyone.
Yeah.
And I understand California is kind of a different animal, and I do understand that. And again, people need to be advocates for themselves, for their families, for their communities, and I'm big on that because I don't live in California. But yeah, I advocate where I live, and I'm big on that. And
we can do the same.
Exactly. But it takes a few people who are willing to stand up and say, hey, this is the change we need. This is the direction we need to go.
There you go. Lee, you have a slogan that you use. Life should be a question. What will happen next? So
Exactly.
I have to ask you, where are you with your new novel series? You talk about adoption a bunch. Tell us a little bit more before you have to go. Oh, we've only got a minute left here. So tell us where you're headed.
Well, my next series is going to be on adoption because I was adopted. I recently found my birth father, and that's part of my new journey. And like I said before, every life is a journey, and we just need to keep figuring out where our next step is because we just never know. And that's the beauty of life. Life is so much fun, and there's just so many places we can take it, and just be willing to be open and be willing to explore.
There you go. We've been talking with Lee Lincoln, everyone, author of the brand new book, The Road West, part of the Broken Roads book series. You can find her at leelincolnauthor.com. That's Leigh Lincoln. I'm going to let everybody else learn how to spell that one. leelincolnauthor.com. You can also find her on social media relatively easily. You can try her on Facebook real easily at Lee Lincoln Author 1. So, Lee, it's been great talking with you and learning about The Road West and your whole series of books and advocacy. So thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, Lee.